Honda made the really famous E, the small hatchback electric car. Incredibly cool, but not that usable. 200 kilometers of electric range makes that a very unique vehicle and a very expensive vehicle. So how do you follow that up? Well, you will have to wait for a long time until 2023, because that's when the Honda Ny1 was released. The name is a mouthful. And the Ny1 needs to do a lot of things because it has come extremely late to the party and to the market. So let's do a deep dive and review the Honda Ny1. Of course, we need to talk about the specs of the car. So let me show you the engine, because the engine powers only the front wheels in this car. You'll find basically nothing, just some plastic cover, the Honda logo, filling up the AC, washer fluid, and if I'm not mistaken, brake fluid. Here we have coolant fluid as well, and here something that I should definitely not touch at all. You see some orange wiring underneath, and you see that there's some cooler stuff, but that's basically everything that you will see. The engine is actually about 200 horsepower, which is plenty for this type of car. The battery though, 68.8 kilowatt hour, and the charging speed, 78. Yes, 78. And the charging port is actually located here, and I'll show you just in a second. But with the 78 kilowatt of charging speed, this car charges from 10 to 80% in 45 minutes. 45! When the competitors are going under 30 minutes, this is doing that in 45. So I need to recalibrate. Who is this car for? And here we have the charging port that gives you those 78 kilowatt of charging speed. Slow charger, fast charger. And with the slow charger, you will charge up the car in about 9 hours. But as I said before, 45 minutes from 10 to 80%. That's not class leading in any stretch of the imagination. But let's talk design, and that's one thing that the Honda Ny1 has really nailed down, I think. It looks very similar to other Honda models, which I think is a good thing, but it looks striking, modern and sophisticated. This paint though, this light blue something metallic paint, is very unique. I like it, but I don't think it's everyone's cup of tea. You have a lot of piano black plastic though, which you can see has already been scratched. Some metal details, some real evidence as well. Let's talk size of this Honda Ny1. So I would compare this with the Volvo XC40, for example, the newly released Kia EV3. Smaller than the Tesla Model Y, but bigger and higher than the Tesla Model 3. So that puts this into perspective. But one thing that this has done amazingly well is that it's used the proportions really well. This has a classic crossover SUV proportion-wise, and it uses that to its advantages. We'll talk about the rear luggage space and the rear seating space and of course the driver space. But in terms of the exterior, I'll talk about the front, I'll talk about the rear a little bit. I have these amazing rear lights, I think. This Ny1 logo or name, this further piano black lower bumper, the metal details. Let's talk rear luggage space, and electrically operated, which is always nice, and flat loading lip in plastic so it doesn't scratch that easily. Always appreciated. The rear luggage space is not that big, to be fair. You do have tethering points on the sides here, and you can open up here to show you the charging cables. A little bit of extra storage underneath, but not that much. There's no lever to fold down the rear seats. You have them actually up here. And it follows down in the 40-60 configuration, which is quite standard. Nothing major here in terms of space. That is because I think the space is in the rear seats and the driver seats, which I'll talk about right now. Unfortunately, there's not that much lower fire support, which is very common in electric vehicles. Let's adjust the headrest. What I really like about these rear seats is the angle of the bench. You sit really comfortably, the softness of the material, and the color of the material is quite cool as well. You do have an armrest here with 2 cup holders, and with the panoramic sunroof that is very big, lets in a lot of natural light. You also have different choice of materials on the side here. There's this more scratchy plastic. Some of this material is on the side here as well, the metal doors, some piano black plastic, cup holder, and buttons for controlling this side window. This is a crossover, but here's the battery pack. Now this is not higher than any regular sedan, so don't see yourself driving off-road with this car, because this car won't be able to handle. Here you have this huge tablet-inspired infotainment system, and it is divided into 3 sections. This will always be in the AC configuration, so you can change that. In the middle you have more regular EV menu, Bluetooth sound, telephone, power flow, all different apps, settings, stuff like that. Up here you have the navigation, but you can also change to connect your phone and stuff like that. Very basic, but very usable, and I like that. Here you have piano black plastic all around, deep cup holders. You have the park, reverse, neutral, drive select buttons. There's no lever here, and a different driving modes. So you have sport, normal, and econ. Parking brake, brake hold, and a button for the car to park itself. I like that they have a lot of buttons, and I even like that they have a selected part of the screen that will always be able to set the temperature. I know that the temperature to change it is here, will always be there, and I really appreciate that. I need to talk about the range, because I talked about the car having a 68.8 kilowatt hour battery, and that should theoretically mean about 430 kilometers of electric range, but it is getting a bit colder here in Sweden. Right now it claims to be 16 degrees, I think it's a little bit colder than that. And when I pick this car up with 99%, I'll put up the actual number and even the picture. I had about 280, maybe 260. And that's a far cry from the claimed range. And that is the same with all electric cars. But since this battery is 10 kilowatt hour smaller than many of the competitors, which is admittedly bigger, this is now cheaper than it previously was, you start to get that, electric range anxiety. And with the slower charging speed of 78 kilowatt, meaning 10 to 80% in about 45 minutes, you will be at the charging place for a long time if you're planning to drive long distances, not just from and to work. I really love the steering. Electric cars are often heavy, which means that the suspension is also quite heavy. And then the steering comes and it's quite dead. But this is quite decent. I like the suspension a lot. I like the steering a lot as well, especially for what this is. I think one of the advantages of having a smaller battery size is that it doesn't weigh as much. This car was over 510,000 Swedish kroner when it was launched. And that is about the same price as a Volkswagen ID4, which is what I would consider the smack dab middle of the lane electric car that many people consider. This does not compete with that. It is smaller, it has a smaller battery size, shorter range, and that Honda realized, so they had to reduce the price of it by 60,000 Swedish kroner. I'll put up the conversion rate. But that Does that mean that Honda is delusional? Does that mean that Honda actually can change themselves and consider, yeah, we did something wrong, but we improved it, now it's cheaper? Are they even making so much margin of sales on this car? I have no idea. But I can tell you that the market that this is trying to compete in is so extremely packed. Every single car manufacturer nowadays have a car in this price category and size. What are my conclusions for the Honda Ny1? Well, it's a mixed bag, because I think this is an amazing vehicle. Honda has really worked on the soft aspects of this car. But when you look at the hard specs of this car, and it was launched in 2023, there's a big question mark. This is quite expensive, or it was quite expensive, and Honda realized this because they had to implement rebates or reduced prices, quite heavy reduced prices, to even compete with other competitors. This was previously in the price category of a Volkswagen ID.4, and with less range, slower charging speeds, and a smaller car, there was nothing to discuss. Those cars were giving you more for the money. Now it is more adequately priced, but still, is it enough in this time of extremely competitive segment? I have a big question mark for that. And I think that actually sums up my thoughts of the new Honda Ny1. It's an amazing vehicle, but too little, too late.